Okay, it's 6:34. I think we should get started. We've got close to 100 participants in the room, and it's great, really great to see you all. I'm seeing a lot of names that I recognize in here, and also a lot that I don't. So welcome. It's fantastic to have you all here. My name is Brendan Griffiths, and I'm on the board here at AIGA New York. I sit on the education committee, and I help to organize this event. So welcome. Thanks so much for joining. This is another special AIGA New York design spotlight event. And these events feature designers sharing, top of mind or breakout work from our community. And we're in for, I think, a really incredible treat tonight. I'm super excited and also super grateful to have everybody here with us. We've got a lot of folks here from our AIGA New York community, as well as a couple of board members that are joining us. So again, welcome and thanks for coming. We're also, after the event, going to have a virtual sort of meet and greets with the speakers. So we're going to have some breakout rooms set up where you can go in and ask them more detailed questions towards the end of the event. So please stick around for that. Before we get started, I want to give a special thank you to Matthew Chavez of Art and People for providing support for tonight's live stream. I also really want to thank Stacey Panasopoulos, who is our fearless executive director here at AIGA New York. She organized and really put everything together for this event, along with my fellow education committee members, Troy Vasilikis, Laura Schofield, and Carlo Diego. Thank you guys for all your help. And yeah, it's a real honor to sit along beside you. I also want to thank all of you, the attendees who are here. By attending this talk and by purchasing a ticket, your presence is a present. By participating, you are supporting AIGA New York and our design community here through the sharing of ideas and inspiration, and of course, helping to fund the future events and initiatives that we have here. AIGA New York is a nonprofit organization with a volunteer board. And so tonight, with all of you joining us, you're already making an impact on strengthening our ability to do more and continuing to be a real design resource for folks here in the community. So again, thank you again. We are super, super grateful. So tonight's Fresh Grad event features graduate students who've just completed their programs from all of the master's programs here in New York City. This is really a return to an event that I think is now in its 13th year. And it's, again, my great honor and pleasure to be hosting this with you guys here. I'm going to start by announcing all the speakers in the order that they're going to present. And then after the presentations, we're going to have a kind of open Q&A with everybody. You can put your questions in the chat, throughout the presentations, or if you want to hold them to ask at the end, and I'll try to moderate that as best I can. So again, please drop questions in the chat if you'd like me to ask them. Or at the end, I believe you can also ask them yourself. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and again, I'm just going to introduce everybody who's going to be speaking tonight in the order that they're presenting, and then they're going to come along and give their presentations. So I'll just read their names now. And again, thank you all for being here. Let's get started. So first up, we're going to have Inês Ayer from SVA, MFA Design. Next will be Ian Beckman Reagan, who is also from SVA in their MA Design Research, Writing and Criticism program. Then we're going to have Janneane Blevins, who is from Pratt's MFA Communication Design program. Next up, we'll have Osama Hussain, who is from SVA's MFA Interaction Design program. After that, we'll have Adnan Aga from NYU's MPS Interactive Telecommunications program, the ITP program. Adnan, excited to see your presentation. After Adnan, we'll have Astha Avinash from SVA's Masters in Branding program. Then we're going to have Hao Loon Hung from Parsons' MS Data Visualization program. Next, we'll have Genaldri Tjahjadi from CCNY's MPS in Branding and Integrated Communications program, BIC. Next up, we'll have Azra Adenwala from Parsons MPS Communication Design Program. Shout out to MPS CD. And last but not least, we will have B. Korsh, who is going to be joining us from Cooper's Certificate Type Design Program. That's everybody. So let's first welcome our very first presenter up to the stage, virtual stage here. Inês, take it away. Again, thank you guys for joining us. I'm super excited to see this. Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing here.
Hi, everyone. Just one moment. Hi, first of all, I wanted to thank AIGA Design and also the MFA Design Program at SVA with co-chair Stephen Heller and Lita Talarico for this amazing opportunity. And today, I want to talk to you about the act of generating life. This should be or April Valentine, who lost her life during a C-section. This experience turned into complete horror. I have spent the last months wrapping my head around the flood of information about the neonatal mortality crisis in the US. The main issues are statistically connected with race and ethnicity. And although these two bodies are biologically the same, doing my research, I found countless infographics that spread misinformation, claiming that being Black is a risk factor for neonatal deaths. Data shows that 80% of these deaths are preventable, and that BIPOC women are 3 times more likely to lose their lives or their newborns. How healthcare workers have handled the concerns of women of color is a long-standing issue, and data leads us to believe that this is a systematic care problem when we have Black mothers dying at twice the rate compared to their white counterparts. I talked to birthing people, doulas, OBGYNs, and midwives to try to understand this ecosystem and gather these main insights that lack of support, implicit care bias, and also cultural misconception were the main reasons for this to be happening. So I want to introduce you to Aliquoti, a device and app that tracks your heart rate, body temperature, and the baby's activity in a non-invasive, affordable, and empowering way. The word Aliquoti comes from a place of science, the act of dividing a whole into equal parts. We felt this was the perfect analogy for generating life, and we wanted to imprint this feeling into our brand and communication. Starting with our wearable device concept that aims to collect data on heart rate, temperature, and baby's activity, and provide accurate user feedback. We have started testing with the thermistor sensor for critical feedback, built upon existing technology, but we want to go further and incorporate heart and motion sensors, so that each BIPOC woman can unpack a safer birth experience. We want to guide mothers, like Fiona Cole, a 24-year-old teacher from Brooklyn, helping her to navigate the pregnancy trimesters and giving her tools to act in each step. Since week 1, she will choose her care type, having access to action guides with prompts and vlogs tailored to her cultural specific worries, and discover our network of providers. Starting week 20, our mother will be introduced to our monitoring device. Here is a sample of how the device behaves in case of irregular activity. The device will start by sending haptic light feedback, forwarding her to her phone to access the dashboard of vital signs and immediate WhatsApp support line. Throughout the pregnancy, and especially during the 4th trimester after birth, we will focus on making sure mothers are mentally supported with our milestone check-in feature, having notifications and the ability to record voice notes. We believe that in order to imprint real change in the quality of care, we also have to build a more aware and empathic network of providers, using our unbiased training and also our learning center for providers. With this product, we are addressing the critical challenges of today, empowering women, improving care, connection, and feedback. Our product discovery is diverse, starting with our website, where mothers and partners can learn how to join our beta testing and support us. At Alicori, we truly envision a flourishing ecosystem from womb to home. What makes Alicoti unique is our integrated care, our broader vital sign feedback, and our cultural specific action guides. We estimate a reach of 2.6 million women in the initial years, and then expanding to further regions outside the US as well. As we know, the issue of neonatal mortality is international and goes beyond the US. Our inspiration came from Mozambique, where our initial research started. We visited hospitals, maternities, and witnessed in first-hand multiple births, and sadly, even stillbirths. We decided to start Alicoti in the US for initial funding and then expand to further regions. Our diverse stakeholders will help us grow from the US, where we will be initially established, and then to Mozambique, applying a buy one, give one model, tailoring our product to different contexts, focusing on data collection and also digitalization of records when we move to Mozambique and other regions. To accomplish our first phase of business development, we are asking for 850K and support from an engineer partner. We want to invite you to join us so that more mothers can hear their newborn's first cry. From womb to home with Alicoti. Please feel free to follow us on social media and also follow my work at Inês_Ayer. I'm available for any Q&A, and good luck to my next speakers. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ian, and first I'd like to extend a big thank you to the entire AIGA New York team for their swift and impressive reworking of the event in light of the world quite literally burning down. And thanks to all of you for attending virtually. Again, my name's Ian, and I'm here representing SVA's MA in Design, Research, Writing, and Criticism. And today I'm going to tell you a story about brands, youth culture, and identity. Let's get into it. Brands, they're plastered across our towns and cities, on our phones and in our homes on TV, messages telling us how to think and act, what to buy. And through advertising, they reinforce the myth that identity is a lifelong project constructed in part by consumerism. But behind the shiny veneer of marketing, brands are filled with contradictions. They advertise self-expression while selling conformity. They celebrate co-creation, but in reality, they're in the business of control. And they often promote social causes while obscuring their ethical ambiguities. So what happens when the teen on the street and the teen in the ad lock eyes? Who's being made by who? Stuck in a vicious cycle, youth culture and consumerism are deeply intertwined. But this wasn't always the case. It was invented. And in fact, we can look back in history and pinpoint a specific moment in time when consumerism created the American teen. Let's go back to the 1940s. The word teenager first appeared in print in a 1941 issue of Popular Science magazine. World War II was nearing its end, ushering in a new era of affluence in the United States. And the rise in part-time jobs during and after the war meant teens had spare change in their pocket and a hunger to spend it. Music, movies, candy, comics, fashion, beauty, youth culture, and the teen consumer were born. And the invention of the teen consumer proved marketing's power not only to manufacture desire, but also to create images that define mass culture, reinforcing what's considered normal and acceptable, in this case being white, skinny, and heterosexual. 17 magazine, launched in 1944, was one of the earliest publications to commercialize youth culture. The key innovation to 17's success was its mastery of the feedback loop. Teach companies all about teen preferences while shaping teens' desires for those very same brands. And this wasn't theoretical, It was a very specific role pioneered by the magazine's promotional director, Estelle Ellis, inventor of an influential marketing campaign named Tina, the prototypical teenage girl. Tina transformed the idea of the teen generation into a market personification, a composite based on the magazine's readership. 17 surveyed teens' hobbies, their anxieties, and their spending habits, and then they flipped these findings, distributing them to advertisers and retailers. From the start of the teen market revolution, businesses like 17 saw youth culture as a lucrative and quantifiable market that could be sold a predetermined identity. So now we're going to jump forward in time to present day, and I'll demonstrate how this feedback loop pioneered by 17 is still very much alive today, and perhaps even stronger than ever. I want you to think about this. You don't need to be a teenager to be sold youth culture. I'll say it slightly differently. Youth culture is sold to all of us. Nike understands this better than anyone. You see, Nike doesn't just sell sneakers and apparel. They operate a content empire, not unlike Disney. But the key difference is that we're the characters living in the brand's fiction. Nike's recently published book, No Finish Line, features speculative fiction and essays on the next 50 years of design and sport. Its new podcast, No Off Season, explores mental health with star athletes. Working out at home has never been easier thanks to the Nike Training Club series, now streaming on Netflix. Last year, Nike held an award show hosted by Drake. And just last month, Nike launched Swoosh, self-described as a new community experience designed to give you the opportunity to co-create the future of Nike through virtual fashion NFTs. Like an entertainment layer on top of reality, Nike's story world continues to grow as consumers become active participants in its co-creation. So what happens when a brand as popular as Nike shapes the attitudes of American teens? I interviewed a handful of Gen Zers to find out, and here's what a few of them told me. So the first, I know a lot of these campaigns about diversity or sustainability are just to hide the fact that they get everything made in sweatshops and a lot of other gross stuff that they do. And another, I think their products are trustworthy and good quality, but I don't think they're an ethical company. And a third, I don't believe in a lot of, if any, multi-million-dollar brands' missions and commitments to do good, but if they're giving marginalized people a platform, it's good, even if it's small. And they're not alone in feeling this way. I know I'm implicated in it too. When a brand is as ubiquitous and as loved as Nike, it can seem unchangeable, especially when Nike claims to be a leader in, and I'm saying this in massive scare quotes, social impact and corporate social responsibility. Here's an example. Several years ago, in celebration of Pride Month, Nike launched a campaign centered around the art of voguing, featuring ballroom dancer and transgender activist Leomi Maldonado. The campaign earned significant praise and media coverage, shining a spotlight on the ballroom scene, ushering it into the mainstream and foretelling popular TV shows like Pose, Legendary, and My House, as well as Beyonce's Renaissance era. And on its face, the campaign might seem well-intentioned, but we can't lose sight of Nike's endgame. You see, Nike positions itself as a platform for youth culture, seducing emerging talent with the promise of global exposure and mainstream recognition. But Nike builds its influence and credibility on the backs of those very same subcultures. In other words, Nike sells the image of empowerment rather than empowerment itself. Is Nike in the business of changing social norms or exploiting subcultures? Can it do both at the same time? I want to be clear, what's at stake here isn't just financial. It's social, it's political, and it's cultural. It's a world where consumerism leaves us complacent, unable to imagine something better. It's a world where the teen on the street and the teen in the ad are increasingly entangled. And it's a world where brands know us better than we know ourselves. If there's one thing I want to leave you with, it's this. This isn't a story just about Nike or 17 magazine. It's about how our identities are shaped from a young age by brands. But by shining a light on the system that's been at work since the 1940s, my hope is that we don't just do it, and instead we think about what brands do to us. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janneane Blevins, and I'm excited to share my presentation, self-similar with you all today. And I'm representing Pratt's Graduation Communication Design Program. So happy to be here. Self-similar is a body of work that explores our human search for patterns. Humans use a variety of languages to communicate with each other, from the words that we speak, the text that we write, and our smiles when we're happy. But language, both verbal and nonverbal, isn't exclusive to humans. Plants and animals communicate using their bodies, voices, and other means and modes unseen by us. My thesis investigates our relationship to nature and asks us to reconsider language and communication as human exclusive systems. In many ways, these questions in this search, while speculative and future looking, bring past and present non-Western worldviews back into focus. Self-similar explores non-human communication systems to open up and propose new frameworks for humans to interact with fellow life on Earth. The goal is not to restore nature, but in Haraway's framing, to recuperate it, to imagine new possibilities for living on Earth together. During my research, I uncovered the following views that trouble our relationship with nature: that it's messy, that non-humans are objects or resources, and that any changes to these previous two challenge human hierarchy and essentialism. This prompts the question that feels ever so relevant today as we suffer from the smoke of wildfires from Canada. We're thinking about the climate crisis, and how is this a communications crisis, and how are we separated from nature and from animals and trees and plants and the other life on Earth? What can we do to change things before it's too late? Encountering the work of Anna Singh, Donna Haraway, Robin Wall Kimmerer, Susan Simard, Eduardo Cohn, and many more prompted a shift in this way of thinking that doesn't do away with the human, but opens it. And here's where I found hope. Looking at the properties we think of as distinctly human, language, culture, society, and history, how might we open them up through everyday engagements with other kinds of creatures? I see an opportunity for design to help visualize, relate, and communicate this shift. Research through design and making led me to a reframing of our relationship with nature. Rather than a messy one, it could be one of fractal dimensions. Instead of objectifying non-humans, we could relate to them on their terms. And Sympoesis provided a method to refuse human exceptionalism and embrace an ongoing making with. To explore these questions, I developed a body of work through a set of design methodologies. Visual and conceptual juxtaposition yielded leaps in understanding of how things relate, like in this macro-micro cosmos. Rhizomatic connecting provided a mechanism to translate and contextualize. And pattern finding was a search for signs, symbols, and meanings, like in the physarum grown here. These methods coalesced in my project Flow Scan Transmissions. I found inspiration in the work of Muriel Cooper, the brilliant founder of MIT's Visible Language Workshop. One experiment in particular resonated with me: her use of flow scan TV, used to communicate between Earth and space. My transformation of Cooper's flow scan provided a mechanism to tune into another species' dimension. Flow scan transmission speculates on messages sent from trees to humans. Glyphs are formed by the space between trees and conversation. These ligatures shift with seasons and growth, are ephemeral as the clouds, but they also recombine into recognizable patterns. The effect of this work is to consider language. How do we relate? And how can we invite people to take a closer look? By relating to the trees and connecting and making meaning, we can find ourselves in them, self-similar. Flow scan transmission was distributed as a broadsheet paper, as both documentation and an invitation to take part in these speculative communications. 1,000 copies were circulated in botanical and community gardens, beloved and threatened parks, along with bookshops and community-run spaces. Flow scan transmissions is part of my larger body of work, Self-Similar, that contains my studies of language, latency, entropy, and emergent communications that move beyond human-centered ways of knowing to planet-centered ones. Moss, tree mold, and fungi are translated into visual patterns, glyphs, and scale-free arrangements. These new ways of seeing and being in the world are a gestalt shift, yielding perspectives that ultimately might help us leap from human to planet-centered paradigms. The thesis process prompted new questions as I continue my work. How do we think beyond language? How do we switch from a mindset of fear to joy while staying with the trouble? And what new possibilities will we find in the space between? Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Something I want to tell you about myself is that I love to draw. And it's something that, that I used to do to observe the world around me and to interact with it. So naturally, one of the biggest fears that I had was me not able to use my hands to draw. Well, my fear is a lot of people's reality. Hi, I'm Osama from the School of Visual Arts Interaction Design program. And I will be talking about artists with severe hand impairments and how can we empower them to draw again. One of the reasons why an artist would have a severe hand impairment would be spinal cord injuries. Specifically, if the injury is at the higher level of the spine, it's called a cervical injury, and it causes shoulder down paralysis for the entire body. This is very difficult for people to live with after the trauma. And simple tasks such as even holding a fork to eat something becomes a tedious.
Sorry, Osama, I don't think we can see your presentation unless I'm missing something here.
All right. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
All right, let me share again. Thank you for it.
No apologies. I wasn't sure if that was part of the intro, but it sounded like you were going
No.
into it. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all good. It's all good.
Can you see it now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
All right, start over again. Yeah, so I hope you guys were listening to me. So I'll just quickly catch up to pace. So my name is Osama, and I'll be talking about artists with severe hand impairments. And one of the reasons why artists do have severe hand impairments is because of spinal cord injuries. And specifically, if the injury is at the higher level of the spine, it's called a cervical injury. And once you have a cervical injury, the person faces shoulder down paralysis. This causes people to to be unable to do simple tasks such as picking a fork to eat something. Even those tasks require them to use assistive and adaptive technologies and a lot of assistance. This is very difficult. This makes very difficult for artists and designers to even hold a pencil. Well, they can use something called a splint, as you can see on the screen. And using this device, they can hold the pencil. However, moving the pencil accurately around is still difficult and requires years of training. And it doesn't really work for people who have even severe impairments. Well, there's another solution out there, which is robotic prosthetics and gloves. Well, the community doesn't really like this one because of two reasons. One, it's at a very high price, starting at $5,000. And also it makes people look more robotic rather than humane. So in my journey, I wanted to figure out how we can empower artists and designers to draw. And one thing which caught my attention with my users is the notion of drawing using a pencil something we created, or can we draw without it? I'm proud to introduce Vocreate. Vocreate is an iPad drawing application that uses voice to draw. It uses something called a Val joystick, which was designed at the University of Washington around a decade ago. It uses the vowel sound to move the cursor around. For example, you can say A to move the cursor up, or to move it to the right, oo to move it down, and E to move it to the left. You can also make different sounds. For example, to open up the menu and do a left click by saying and a right click by saying ch. Now I'm going to demonstrate how this works by making a little happy mountain.
A E U Ye Ye Ye
The reason why the user is not able to draw continuously is because they're using voice to draw. So they need to take a break to take a breather in before they continue drawing. But despite that drawback, the user was able to draw an organic shape using just the natural sounds without ever touching the screen. And just to give you a little idea of the power of such a technology could be, I'll compare Vocreate with the most common method right now for the artists with severe hand impairments, which is using a splint, as I've shown you before. One, because Vocreate is a software, it can be marketed as a lower price point. But more importantly, it will give the users the ability to have more precise file control compared to Splint, which does not give that ability, at least not until 5 years down the line. Vocreate is also easier to just open is as simple as opening an application. While using a Splint, you need to find it, wear it, and adjust it because it's a physical device. But most importantly, Vocreate gives back the independence that users have lost after the trauma. Because Splint requires a lot of assistance for artists with severe hand impairments to wear them. Now, I'm excited to see what the community thinks of this idea and makes with such a technology. And the most important lesson that I learned by doing this project and my thesis was that designing with the people who are facing inaccessibility is the most important aspect of designing with them, and not for them and giving them a solution at the end. Thank you very much.
All right. Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me on the call. I'm so excited to present to you all today at the Fresh Grad event, virtual. Here is my ITP graduate thesis. God knows. All right, so let's jump back a couple years to 1996. DVDs were just invented in Japan, Dolly the sheep was cloned, and Tom Cruise just starred in Mission Impossible. Also, this cute big-eared baby that you saw very briefly was born. He looks pretty innocent, right? But this baby hides a dark secret. He can't smell. Now, it might surprise you guys to know, but that baby is me. Hi, I'm Adnan Aga, and I have congenital anosmia. This is a condition in which people are born with a lifelong inability to smell. Studies suggest that approximately 1 in 10,000 people are affected by congenital anosmia. This is according to Fifth Sense, a charity dedicated to smell and taste disorders. But like, what does that mean? It means that all the smells that you guys get to experience, I can't. So stuff like the oud, this strong traditional fragrance that my dad would drench me in on Eid every year, to the Old Spice Fiji body wash that I literally use every day. These are smells that I won't be able to experience. Even the subway that I take every day, and more recently, the sepia tone outside, these are experiences that I will never be able to truly appreciate. And so naturally, I felt like I was missing out on something. And so with that, there are tons of objects around that I want to know what they smell like. You know, does a cinder block smell heavy? Does a knife smell sharp? Do pugs smell as ugly as they look? I wanted to try and understand what smell worked, or how smell worked, but from my point of view, which is, how do I, a non-AIGA, who does not have a functioning nose, how do I smell? And this is how. I am 26 years old. I've had 26 years of seeing the world around me. I've had 26 years of understanding the world around me. And I've had 26 years of knowing the world around me. So an example that we can take is, here are climbing shoes. You know, a scent that I've heard is very strong, but I don't know. I can see that they're climbing shoes. I know that they're climbing shoes. And I've been told that they smell sweaty and gross, you know, like wet rubber, a pungent, musky scent, which again, I don't know what that truly means, but I have an idea now. And so I'm here at ITP, the Interactive Telecommunications Program. And so I need to have a plan, which is, can I make a system that can smell things the way I do by using the techniques and skills that I've learned here at ITP, this little playground of nerds? And so, okay, how can I make a computer smell the way I do? Let's start with the tech, because, you know, tech school. I can use something like a little camera to be my eyes. I can use a computer like a Raspberry Pi to do the understanding. I can use the internet to be my new source of knowledge. And so with that, I have my tech. And we can replace the same flow with, we see an object, we can use our Raspberry Pi, which is a tiny computer, to understand what it is. And we can use our prior knowledge to predict its smell, except now it's just a little bigger. We have more knowledge. And so, cool, that's great. Now, how can I make this system look as good as my face? And because all these soft baby hands have ever done is code. And so now we move into the sculpture. The sculpture, I start off by 3D scanning my face, which gave me the 3D model that'll be in your nightmares tonight. I 3D printed this giant model that I had. It was and then assembled. It was sanded, filled, and sprayed. And with that, this nose that I made turned into odd nose. And here it is.
Fantastic. May I request that you leave it on the shelf for a bit longer so I can fully take in the aroma? Indulge your senses with a harmonious blend of rich cocoa, buttery caramel, and a subtle hint of vanilla. Just like a whiff of freshly baked cookies, the chocolatey and creamy aroma teases your nostrils, evoking a delightful sense of comfort and satisfaction.
Odd Nose premiered on Sunday, April 30th at a Smell and Tell event at Olfactory Art Keller, a gallery based in Chinatown that focuses on smell-based experiences. People brought all sorts of interesting objects for the nose to smell. They brought pizza, vapes, even some shoes. They followed the instructions on the wall. They pulled out the booger receipts. They were in awe of the descriptions that it gave. By the end of the night, there was an entire community that experienced the world that Odd Nose and I do. And they're not alone. There are fantastic charities out there, like Fifth Sense and Absent, doing really great work, trying to raise awareness and remind people that the smell disabled exist. You know, throughout the night, I heard stuff like, is that modeled off your nose? It's so smooth. The receipts are so cute. How did it know? And wait, you can't smell? And when somebody said the words, wait, you can't smell, it gave me the chance to talk about it. Odd Nose was my way of creating a sculpture that was able to understand the world of smell the same way I do. It was my way of coming to terms with my own disability and to serve as a reminder that I, Adnan Aga, have anosmia. I was born without a sense of smell, and therefore I can't experience the world the same way as everyone else. But that's okay.
Smelly cat, what are they feeding you? Smelly cat, it's not your fault.
Wow, that's great.
Oh, yeah?
You know, you could totally sell this. It'd be perfect for like, a Kitty litter campaign.
A jingle? No.
Why not? You make a ton of money.
Okay, well, if I was in this for the money, I would be a millionaire by now, you know?
Thank you, everyone. And especially thanks to Stacy and the AIGA New York team. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can all see my screen. And good evening, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be presenting here amidst all these brilliant minds. I am Astha Avinash, a master's student at the School of Visual Arts Masters in Branding program here in Manhattan, NYC. Brands are a powerful cultural force. Brands wield the power to mold and shape culture, behaviors, and our environment. And we've seen examples in our zeitgeist. We see the current backlash on Anheuser-Busch products as a cultural force that has not only created a spurring controversy on the internet, but has forced governments to alter laws concerning the civil rights of the trans community. We see brands like Grubhub altering the way we behave, be it more and more isolated in our homes or even our spending habits. We see brands like Patagonia benchmarking authenticity when it comes to impacting the environment. And as young graduates, as young brand strategists, we possess the power to shape cultural discourse through brands. We can foster meaningful dialogues and drive positive change within society. So when I was introduced with my 100-day project, I was seeking inspiration that could harness the powers of brand in culture. A 100-day project is a self-directed project that we complete over a span of 100 days. NYC is the global cultural hub where the best of the best come in, a dream in itself. I was sharing a city that is home to some of the finest art museums in the country. Sharing the city where the Starry Night resides, sharing a city where Edward Hopper's classic reside. While ideating, I just had 4 words in my mind: NYC, culture, art, and brands. And so the Museum of Modern Brands was thus born. Museum of Modern Brands uses art as an expression to recontextualize brands and challenge their positioning. Over 100 days, I transform historically and culturally rooted artworks by incorporating branded objects, reshaping their narratives, and offering a fresh perspective on the contemporary society. This painting, titled 3 Girls by Amrita Shergill, an Indian oil painting artist, talks about the destiny of a few rural Indian women and how they're unable to change it. When I put Coca-Cola in this context, I question, can Coca-Cola genuinely bring joy even in the face of harsh realities? With Nighthawks by Edward Hopper, who wanted to bring forth themes of isolation in larger cities, I question, did Grubhub contribute to further societal isolation following the pandemic? With the controversies around Bud Light, do we think that the fight for liberty will ever end? And when we speak of the central panel of Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights, it was based on a human's journey from innocence to corruption. With Museum of Modern Brands, I stretched this narrative to bring forth and shed light on the capitalist society that we've now become, calling it now the Amazon of Earthly Delights, where we succumb to the sinful allure of consumerism. Sometimes these posts are parallels that can be a commentary on the brand's impact. Here we see the birth of Venus as a symbol of rebirth and fertility during the Renaissance. Similarly, we see Tampax as a symbol of menstrual health care advancement. Sometimes these posts are for the gag. we see Mohini, a mythological Hindu character painted by Raja Ravi Verma, where I see her with this Lululemon belt bag on a mission here to fight and destroy her enemy. There is so much more to share, and I have so little time. I am on day 64 of 100, and every day I learn something new. In doing this project, not only did I find myself knowing more about the art history, but I also found a new developed interest in storytelling. I found resilience in performing one task every single day. Museum of Modern Rant encourages me to keep questioning the given. And I would like all of you all to join this conversation on Instagram at Museum of Modern Rants. You can also check out more of my work on my website. And once again, I would like to thank AIGA for giving me this opportunity to speak and making this event possible, even when we were faced with this natural calamity. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. At first, I would like to thank AIGA for having me join this event and also thank everyone to attend the presentation. And today I'm going to talk about the modern music. Have you ever gotten lost in the thousands of playlists on Spotify, wondering what great music everyone is praising for, what masterpiece you have missed? To figure out these questions, my project Soundscape in the Post-Millennium, visualizing the music trends of the 21st century by analyzing the top 100 album lists from the year 2000 to 2022 in the Radio Music Review website, is trying to find some hints to understand what the music scene in modern era looks like. To present an overview of music trends during these 23 years, this album wall listing from top left to bottom right shows the top 100 albums every year, and you can hover to flip back to see the album information. To the general sections, the charts show the distribution of the album over 20 years grouped by 10 music genres, which are metal, rock, pop, folk, hip hop, jazz, electronic, R&B, and ambient and classical. And it shows that surprisingly, metal genre albums account for a huge proportion in the top 100 list during these 23 years. This is not a genre well accepted by the public. However, thanks to the music streaming platforms or online music website, this subculture still can be heard and gather communities or even build up social cultural identities for audiences. It reflects an interesting example that technology is helping diversify the scenes in the music world. The 19th scenes in which alternative rock and grunge is dominant in the music world is changing after the post-millennium era. Instead, rapping becomes viral throughout the world in recent years. More and more artists devoted their creativity to this field. The number of hip-hop albums in the top 100 list was constantly increasing, even over metal and rock albums. Okay, as for the country's perspective, though you can find 57 countries' music in the top list over these 20 years, the United States and United Kingdom account for over half of the total albums. Many countries only have 1 or 2 albums appear in the list. These numbers reveal that even if we have more resources to listen to music all around the world, the versions that are easily heard by audiences are still from cultural power nations. These are tons of great music works needed to be discovered, especially in African and Asian areas. Regarding the quality of music, most of the top 100 albums gather ratings between 3.68 to 4.0 every year. However, there are more albums in the recent year list which rating down to 3.5, and also fewer albums with rating up to 4.1. Also, the trend also, the trends of the average rating of the top 100 list is decreasing. Does it mean that the quality of new albums are worse compared to the early age, or nowadays music listeners are more strict about album quality because they have more resources to get access to music than before? It may have plenty of factors affecting this trend. After this really quick introduction, hope you can find your own reason for the modern music. Thank you.
Hey guys, my name is Genaldri Tjahjadi, pronouns he, him, his. I'm a recent graduate from the City College of New York, just earned my Master of Professional Studies in Branding and Integrated Communications, or commonly known as BIC.
Genaldri, one second before you start, your presentation is not showing. So if you, I only see your notes.
Am I not screen?
You shared your screen, but we couldn't see your presentation, just your.
Gotcha. What about now?
Let's check. Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome.
Sorry. Thank you so much.
No worries. Where was I? I just earned my Master of Professional Studies in Integrated Communications, or commonly known as BIC. And before I start, I'd like to say thank you to the AIGA for giving us this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I would also like to give a shout out to my teammates, Jamie Lunt and Hanako Suzuki, my program director, Nancy Tag, my mom, Abby Andriani, and also to a few BICsters in the house. If you aren't familiar with BIC, it's a program that combines theory and practice and in an interdisciplinary and collaborative way that tackles integrated communication solutions. But enough about my school. We're here for the fun part. We're here to talk about video games, specifically Diablo 4. It's an action role-playing game developed and published by Blizzard Entertainment, and it is the 4th main installment in the Diablo series. It's an extremely popular game, which has amassed a cult following since 1997. So we were tasked, scroll down. We were tasked, sorry, this was actually a brief from the young ones of this year, and we were tasked to launch Diablo 4 as the biggest game of the year. So we started exploring several avenues. Do we appeal to the community who is a diehard Diablo fan, or do we tap into the community that's not familiar at all with Diablo? And as we did more research, we found out that this latest installment actually has a very prominent feature, the expansion of their character customization. So immediately we thought about tapping into the community who has an affinity to customizing their looks in real life. Oops, because who else can hype up a game about hell that features character customization other than the original character customizers who have gone through hell in real life? Drag queens. Once we find this connection, everything just falls into place. Whoops. Enter Drag Through Hell, an integrated communications campaign to launch Diablo 4 on behalf of Activision Blizzard. This campaign will harness the LGBTQ community's power to influence culture and make Diablo relevant to today's gamers, especially since they are 29% more likely to play RPGs than the general population. It will be anchored in a drag show that is 100% designed with elements from Diablo, such as the music, stage design, costume, and much more. The cool part, this campaign will be held during Pride Month, and which is when the game is launching. And as you can see there, as a result, we won a bronze pencil for experiential campaign and a merit for integrated campaign. And I have a little video to show, but before I show you the video, let me read our campaign manifesto. Hell, what is it? A fiery pit of evil souls? A level to unlock in a game? Fact, it is a place on earth, a place where no one accepts you, a place where no one understands you, a place where you cannot be you. Bullshit. We've seen hell, we've been demonized, we fought evil, and yet we're still here, surviving, thriving. We're an unstoppable army. Our massacre is our art. Too much carnage? No such thing. Too much fab? Yes, please. So bring on the glam, bring on the gore, gear up, get ready to slay. Director out. And now I will show you the video.
Shut down an Ohio drag story time.
I've been in jail for 15 years for appearing outside in drag.
And thank you guys for tuning in.
Hi guys, I'm Azra. I'm really excited to get into some shit with you guys today. Firstly, big shout out to Stacy, to AIGA New York, and Parsons. It's really an amazing opportunity to be able to present in front of you guys. So let's get started. So we all talk shit, but somehow we seem to draw the line at our shit. There's a stigma when it comes to discussing our BMs, and my object of my research for my capstone was to understand why. So right now, there's around 79 million people around the world taking a dump, if not more. It could be Michelle Obama, it could be Harry Styles. If they're not pooping, they're thinking about it. And for some reason, there is such a hush-hush tone to these conversations because of their tainted reputation, that only 1% of debilitating problems resulting from this, like IBS, comes up on social media at 1% of the frequency as depression or anxiety, even though they have about the same incident rate. Throughout my user research, one thing really stood out. A good poop is the ultimate cleansing ritual. We all have a really great poop story, but for some reason, because we don't communicate it, we are unable to understand our gut and our bodies better and our bowel movements better. Through a lot of research, one thing that stood out to me was Hims and Hers and how they normalize health and wellness challenges by repackaging it for consumers. And I was aiming to do the same thing for our poop. Now, today has been a pretty shitty day. It's sad that we're not all in person, but we love it anyway. So this is introducing dump. Healthy poo, healthy you. So dump demystifies and destigmatizes poop through communication. I'm going to take you through my entire user flow and my onboarding journey, which is what my main focus was, considering a lot of mental health applications need to be customizable for their users. I'm going to do that through TED. Now, Ted is an average guy. He's relatively healthy, has occasional binge here and there. Now, Ted, he hasn't been able to poop in 3 days. He's been feeling bloated and uncomfortable. He's not sure if he should contact a doctor, if it's even that serious. So he brings it up with a friend who recommends dump. When he downloads dump, he's treated with a little delightful animation along with an informative anecdote. The onboarding flow itself is a series of 5 questions. Through my research, one thing that really stood out was the power of language, especially when it comes to talking about sensitive topics. It's important to make users feel comfortable in a language that they would like to communicate in. He mentions what he'd prefer calling his dumps, when was the last time he took a dump, if he's felt any symptoms, both mental and physical, that could have affected his bowel movements. And throughout the onboarding flow, there are customized animations and customized insights that he gets that helps put his mind at ease while he is still taking his own time to trust the app. When Ted logs in, there are 3 actionable items. First is shit talk, which is all about finding your community. Now, shit talk allows you to basically ask for advice, give advice, get expert tips, or just talk about poop and open up the conversation. When Ted decides to poke around in the community, he surprisingly finds his exact dilemma posted out there. He's constipated, fiber doesn't seem to work for him. And an expert suggests that, fiber is not the most important thing. He needs to have a lot of water. And he's able to trust these resources. He's able to do better. He's able to just try and calm down. He's greeted with some messages from his friend. He feels finally at ease. He chuckles and decides to trust the app further. And going forward, Dump 2.0 is also going to be focusing on 2 other features, one being log out, log in, which is a feature that allows you to journal your dumps. Again, through research, it's been found out that your body has its own natural way of bullet journaling, and that's pooping, right? It gives you all the valuable insights into your body, the shape, size, consistency. These things tell you a lot about how you're doing, what you're lacking, and what you need. And being able to use a simple tracking device and being able to connect to other trackers, it allows you to gain invaluable insights into your overall wellness. The second feature would be Crap Library, which is on-the-spot entertainment. It's a repository of music, articles, exercises, and games that help you dump out with ease. The brand itself, of course, influenced by poop, but I didn't want it to be too on the nose. While embracing these colors of browns and yellows, I wanted to still keep them, but I didn't want them to be the highlight of the brand. I wanted to take away from the one visual identity of the poop emoji that we all have and move beyond that and move further in a way that's friendly, that's approachable, that allows us to continue having these conversations. When I brought this up with an acquaintance recently, it was quite an interesting conversation because I found out that he tried to sell his poop to just, make a couple of extra bucks in college. But the funny part is he was rejected twice. So poop has the power to open up these conversations. We're all, like I mentioned, thinking about it. But it's important to start talking about it as well. One thing that I really learned through this entire process was never ignore a gut feeling. So thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. My name is B, and I'm just about to share my screen. Hi, my name is B. I went to the Type at Cooper program last year, and I'm here to share my final project, Point Made. Point Made is a sans serif typeface designed for qualitative research. It was based on a friend of mine's work as a PhD student. Qualitative research features subjectivity, while quantitative research, sorry, I can't see my notes, one sec. Yeah, qualitative research features subjectivity, while quantitative research aims for objectivity. And qualitative research, I thought, deserves a humanistic typeface that matches its subjective style, while also excelling in strict, dense, and precise typography. At Type at Cooper, we are tasked with designing text faces based on the broadnib pen, a traditional calligraphic tool. So I studied the tool to better understand how it worked and develop my sense of rhythm or proportion. I practiced most days. For the final project, I did lots of ideation sketches, Sharpie, whiteout on paper. Sometimes I bring it onto the computer. While I feel like no single sketch was final, a lot of various characteristics of them made it into the final design. This is a waterfall of the entire family, 5 weights in 2 styles, Roman and italic, ranging from book weight to heavy. Bringing back the sketches for a second, here are some comparisons between various letters in the sketches and in my final design. These focus on proportional and structural similarities. We've got rectangular counters and round characters, which help them stay upright while retaining the slanted contrast that is part of the broadnib style. We've got condensed proportions with, that help with the double column, which is common formatting for journals. And we have open apertures, which keeps things legible at small sizes by reducing ink spread. Here are some other evidences of the broadnib pen, which is difficult to do in a low contrast sans typeface because a lot of the details that you would have access to, like serifs and whatnot, are gone. So we have the translation contrast, which is another word for the contrast created by a broadnib pen, which is where the thicks and thins go in the design. You can see thins in the top left and bottom right. We have angled entry and exit strokes, which is something that's common in calligraphy, starting a stroke, exiting a stroke, coming in at an angle. And that also creates more white space between the initial downstroke and the arch, which increases legibility. We also have flared strokes and slanted terminals. Flaring comes from the pressure of the pen at the end of a stroke, and the angle comes from the angle that the pen is held at. These are things that work on the granular level and are easy to distribute across the typeface, creating a more holistic sense of the design, but also allowing for me to problem solve difficult letters like a capital W, distributing the weight more evenly. This is a page showing how those various characteristics play out in the different styles. The heavier weight gets a higher level of contrast and more flaring, while the italic gains more angles and a smooth branching from the stem to the arch. Point Made comes with a true italic, meaning it uses traditional calligraphic forms rather than slanted Roman forms. So you can see the curved second stroke of the V, the curved stroke of the I of the E, the G and the A have different forms. In the N, you can see the smooth branching I was talking about before, which is also present in the G and A and other similar forms in the typeface. This comes from italic being about how many times you pick up the pen while you're writing rather than a specific stylistic idea. This is the different weights and styles set at text size. This was target size and most of what my energy was going to. I wanted even the heaviest weights to be legible and easy to read. This is the standard character set that we have to produce for the program, which includes ligatures. I actually included 4 sets of figures, though only 2 are pictured, currency, math, punctuation, and standard European language support. To show off my work, I redesigned the journal that published my friend's research paper, on my own. You can see the lightest and heaviest weights on the cover posing as display type, while the middling weights are used in the interior. And you can see how the different styles work well together and create a hierarchy. Here we have a close-up of a bibliography, which also features the 3 weight pairings that I recommend, which is commonly skipping ones. So 16 has book and medium, 17 has regular and bold, and 18 has medium and heavy. Since I graduated, I've been working as a typeface designer and TAing for the program. This is a Brad nib sketch that I made for a student trying to demonstrate how we think about constructing these letters. This particular zigzag approach was developed by a well-known type designer, Gerrit Noordzij, and this is what we're specifically taught in the program. So I have been working on my own formalization of that technique as a typeface. So still just like the typeface I've been showing you, based on the Brad nib pen, but very different. At this scale, the zigzags themselves take over and create an abstract experience, though somewhat legible. As the design decreases in size, it becomes more and more legible. The rhythm transitions from the zigzag internal rhythm to the external shape rhythm. And my goal is to have it function as a normal text space at small size. So this is me working on the same stuff as we learned in the program. Thank you so much. I will be presenting next week at the Type Lab part of Typographics Conference about the second typeface. If you care to join, it is free on Thursday at 1 p.m. Thank you.
Fantastic. Sorry, B, thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of our presenters. That was really amazing to see. I'm sorry. We have maybe about 15 or 20 minutes for a quick Q&A session now. So I'd love to get, if all the presenters could turn their video back on. Let's see here. I'm going to put you guys in gallery mode. And we are going to, I think, give the audience the ability to turn their video on as well. If you guys want to ask questions directly. There's been a couple of questions that came up in the Q&A box. There was one just asked by Kristen Domenico. Sorry for the sorry for the siren here. I can read that to start, and I have a few questions of my own, but maybe just to get this started, I think just it's more of a clarifying question for Azra about whether you created the UI in addition to the user flows and sort of what your role was in all of that. My assumption was that I mean, just knowing the MPS program was that was your work end to end. But if you also did the UX writing, the writing is I would also say is really fantastic. And really the question being like, what did you enjoy in doing all of that? If that was all your work, yeah, Azra, if you're up to ask that or answer, yeah.
Yeah, of course, you're right. This was considering the program. Basically, the capstone project entails that we do the UX research as well as the UI up until the final hi-fi prototyping. So it was me. I did enjoy writing the copy the most. I feel like there are a couple of people on this call in the same program as me who've probably heard me constantly come up with lines and just really get excited about it. But the entire process was quite exciting from the research. I feel like it was quite challenging pinning down like a user group, considering that this is just a normal bodily function that, we all deal with, which was both a boon as well as a challenge. And that was exciting to, get through. I felt like I just turned into like the resident poop girl because I was bombarded with memes, with anything associated with poop, which is interesting. So throughout like the entire process, the journey was quite exciting.
Thanks so much. I'll ask a follow-up question since you mentioned the kind of research component, and I mean, it sounds like you spoke with users around that, and I'm curious about like the history component. If you did a lot of research in terms of, culturally, when, I mean, I have two young children, and I think kind of see this with kids, like they have this obsession in some cases with poop. But was there kind of like turning point where this taboo sort of started, and did you like, I don't know any of that history, so I'd be curious to understand if you uncovered any of that. And yeah, I guess like, obviously like cross-culturally there are I think different rituals and customs around the way people use the bathroom. But yeah, I guess I'm really curious in that, that question in terms of the research, like if there was something that you saw, like if there was a turning point, or if this is something that's really existed. It seems to be like, from my knowledge, seems to be universal across cultures. But I would just, yeah, if there were any insights that you could kind of share with us, I would love to hear them.
It's really interesting that you mentioned you have young kids, because that was one, like in terms of all the user research that I did, I will say that, I didn't get to dive into too much of the history, but rather just about articles and especially a lot of communities, especially like scientific communities who are really taking this seriously now to predict patterns in the future, and just what it can say about history in general, not just bodily history or like what it can tell us about ourselves, but about planetary functions, a lot of things, and it's quite exciting. But with user research, I did actually come up with there were a lot of interesting insights around relationships, around especially as, parents and children, kids love talking about poop, like you said, like they're obsessed with it. Parents are obsessed with it when their kids talk about it. And there's a lot of resources around that, but somehow throughout, and it is universal, while there are certain people who are comfortable talking about it, when it comes to larger audiences, somehow it is still a hushed conversation. And somehow between growing up, we seem to have completely shied away from being able to talk about it. And it's a weird barrier in relationships, but at the same time, it does, like, it's when you cross that a threshold, there's a new era, like it's a new era of comfort that you feel with your partner. And one of the prototypes that we worked on was like a dating tracker, or like a dating and relationship tracker, which could be interesting to explore. So yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question directly, but there were still a lot of very interesting insights while I was doing all of my research.
That's fascinating. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I think fantastic body of work. Thank you for sharing. And I'm happy to open it up. If my fellow education crew wants to jump in with any questions, you guys are more than welcome to ask, or if any of the audience would like to jump in.
There are a few questions in the chat box. I'm just looking through. I know there's a question for B from Troy Vasilakis. What font weight felt most natural when you started? Which weight or glyph was the most difficult to make?
I started with the book Roman. Honestly, good practice is to start with the heavy side, because that's the most difficult, because there's just no room for anything. But wanted to start with the most useful style. But yeah, so started with book, and most difficult is definitely the heavier weights, probably like a lowercase g. The more shapes, and the less space, the harder it is. It's like there's no room for anything. Yeah.
Thanks so much, P. Anyone else from the audience? Or I can also, there was a couple, I'm noticing there's a couple in the answered section here. Janneane, I don't know if you want to expand on this. I think this is actually a very interesting conversation, right? The question of like, that there could be some in some perceived future, like a two-way communication between plants and humans. I love that idea. And you had mentioned that you're sort of, really just I think, rightfully beginning with trying to listen. But I would love to, if you have any other thoughts, I'd love to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that question, and thanks to Kristen for asking it, because I think it is something, there's so many disciplines interested in this topic right now. Specifically, I think in the face of climate change, it's like, okay, how are we going to survive on this earth? And what are some other creatures that are already figuring it out, and how are they responding? So what can we learn from them? And I think I just really found the inspiration in plants, because I think our bodies work in so many different ways, but also there's this shared connection with them. And so on the one hand, there is kind of this like ethical thing we're thinking through. And I attended a really fantastic seminar at the New School presented by Vanessa Lem, who does things in critical plant studies. And her whole tangling was what is our responsibility? And I'm sorry if you guys can hear a crying toddler in the background. It's bedtime at my house. So if you hear that, I'm so sorry. But yeah, it's really fascinating. I think we're trying to struggle through how not to make ourselves extraordinarily human-centered while also listening and talking back. Because I think that there would be some really fascinating things to say if we could have two-way dialogues. And I'm all for seeing how this like journey continues to take us, and how like incredibly inspiring and amazing to think about like talking to plants. And there's some cool, like on a final note, I think there's actually really interesting things happening in like sound studies right now. So there's devices that you can hook up to your plants. And I think it's another New School person too, Harpreet Singh, but he's able to hook up all these really incredible sensors to plants and track their movements, record their sound, translate it into music. So I think we're finding all these really creative ways to connect, maybe communicate, maybe talk, maybe show that we care and like take care of plants and animals and the things around us. So I'm just really excited. I think it's a cool world that we live in. There's scary stuff going on, but if we use our imaginations for good and kind of think through that, I think some awesome things are going to come out of it.
It's funny you mentioned Harpreet. I think his work is really interesting in this. In the same vein. I do wonder though, in terms of like, the digitization of that even, right? It's like, again, framing that around a kind of human understanding of even like what a message is, right? And I'm actually
Yes.
I really love your work and the way that it perhaps tries to query that a little bit, right? Tries to question a little bit of what our understanding of a message even is, right? Like that idea of a message is a very human-centered and human-centric framework of understanding how objects interact with one another in space, right? Or not objects, but just living things, right? Not necessarily beings.
You summarized
but I think
that perfectly. It's exactly that quandary.
Right. And like, sure. And like the problem, of course, is that as humans, right? Like you can't really, you're doing that out of necessity as well, right? There isn't really another way to do it. But I do think it's very important, especially as designers, that we start to think about, like other ways perhaps of trying to engage that are not necessarily human centric in that respect, right? That there are, a lot of other entities that we're engaged with on the planet and beyond. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So perfectly summarized. And I think, like you said, I as I like found myself in this research and kind of thinking through these issues, exactly what you said, you have to start at some point. So we start with the things that we know and how we relate. And I think the key thing is to keep open and just try out new ways of connecting and just really be receptive and listen to these different ways that we might be able to communicate or connect. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Janneane.
We have
There's a couple questions
coming in. Yep. We have some questions coming in.
There's been a few questions for Ian. One you had answered in the Q&A box, but also just, I think this kind of came in from Laura and also from Jia Hyun, just kind of about, other, Nike was your kind of case study, but, other brands that have kind of successfully followed that kind of model, or other brands that I think that are exploring that kind of communication space. Ian, if you want to expand on that, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, totally. I guess I'll answer Laura's question first and then G's, if that's okay. So Laura was asking if I've seen any good examples of brands that take a political stand. And I would say that generally I'm pretty cynical, or at least suspicious of when brands take overt political stands, because I think it's easy for them to become performative. I mean, I think that we saw plenty of examples of that in the past few years. But one that stood out to me recently, and I'm forgetting the specific name of it, but the Ben from Ben & Jerry's ice cream launched a cannabis company in the past year. And it's not a for-profit company. It's a company whose business model is completely built around all of the profits going to smaller businesses, I think mostly around the Northeast region, that are either owned by people of color, marginalized communities, but also specifically people that were formerly incarcerated because of drug possession, cannabis possession. So I thought that felt like a pretty genuine example to me. There's another one. I'm sure everybody has heard of ChatGPT, and the company that owns it is OpenAI. And I think that there's probably a lot of questionable things that they do. That's just speculation. But one thing that I thought was interesting is that they have a profit ceiling built into their model. So that means that, and I don't know the exact number for this either, but once the company reaches a certain profit ceiling, all the extra money gets funneled into a nonprofit that ostensibly is based around doing social good around AI. So I think that when it comes to brands and politics, you kind of have to follow the money. True for most things in life. So those are two examples. Another question from G. So I'm going to just read it out loud so I know what it is. What are some of the other brands you've found that have also successfully followed the Nike method of managing to pump out enough youth-centric, evocative, feel-good branding to offset the actual negative impact they leave or influence under the surface? I mean, most brands, like big companies, big corporations that are directed towards teenagers, children, I would say fall under that category. I would say maybe the first that comes to mind in terms of like most ludicrous, once you take a second to think about it, is any soda company. So like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, it being sugary water, but it's, they have all of these things about it. It brings the world together, that it can stop wars, it can reduce differences among people, but it's just soda. But I would say that if there's a brand that is marketing itself to teenagers, you have to ask, what actually is its message, and then is it actually delivering on that message? And if I could distill my thesis down to a single point, it's 9 times out of 10, they're trying to sell you something rather than actually do the thing that they're promising to do.
Thanks so much, Ian. Will we ever throw off the chains of capitalism? I don't know if that's
I don't know.
Something we can answer tonight, but yeah. There's a question in the chat for Adnan about just trying to expand on how the nose knows what it's smelling. Is there a camera or some kind of, what's the sort of sensor suite there? And how is that translated back to text? I was also curious of that myself.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. So inside the nose, right? Kind of like in the presentation, I mentioned there was like a camera. So there's like a little camera attached to this computer, but the flow and the camera is inside one of the nostrils. So you hold something underneath, and this camera takes a picture of the object. And then what it does is it's very similar to Google Lens, if you guys know what that is. It's this thing where you take a picture of something and then it'll tell you what that thing is. So it'll be like, oh, those are AirPods Pros, right? So it takes a picture of the thing, it figures out what it is. It then will send that very appropriately, Ian, to ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT to be like, hey, what do AirPods Pros smell like? Be as detailed as possible. Explain it to me because I don't have a sense of smell. And then it spits out a description. So I don't necessarily know what it's going to spit out. And it was kind of funny. I showed this off more recently in a slightly different setting, and people went underneath the nose. Like they wanted to know what the nose thought they would smell like. And I have no idea what the nose is going to say. So it was very scary for me if the nose spit out something like, this person smells, so yeah, it's cameras and ChatGPT. And that's kind of how it works.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, and makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, like, I think your presentation, and I think also the presentation of the object, the product itself, I think was like such a fantastic way of building empathy around your condition, and I think a lot of that was rolled up in like its connection back to you personally, and we got to know you a little bit here. I'm curious, like, if you've thought about how that maybe scales out a little bit, like if there's a web app, or what I mean, not to go there necessarily, but I wonder if and I think again that like that empathy building seems to me like the point in a sense of the project. Like, is there a way that maybe also works for other senses in a way, right? Like that there's other things that this could be translated out to, and yeah, I mean, scale always being the question, but like, yeah, how does the thing scale?
The thing that immediately came to mind is there is an app out there called Be My Eyes, right? It's kind of like the equivalent of like, say if a low vision person isn't able to like understand what they're seeing in front of them, they can open up this app, and then this app will essentially turn the camera on, and it allows them to place a call to somebody else who is also using the app to look through the camera and then do the description for the person. And in that way, it's a very smart way of taking a true true sense and being able to describe it to the person. In the case of smell, we aren't nearly at that place just yet to be able to translate smell truly in a one-to-one fashion. So this is just a best guess, a best approximation of what a smell might be. What is really great though is part of my research for this, I've been talking to like smell and like specifically like odor related researchers that are trying to figure out how can you make an accurate representation of smell. And they're doing this with machine learning, with physical sensors to be able to take the smell of something and accurately translate that to a form that people who don't have the like olfactory bulbs can still experience. And so I think that there's some combination of taking an absurd sculpture like the thing I made with real research and real technology and combining it to make something that can accurately describe it. And I think once you get attention on something like that, that's when you can start to scale stuff up into more common translations of things.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. A question for how that came up in the chat. There was a genre of music that, or was there a genre of music rather that really surprised you, from your research outside of metal you had mentioned in your presentation? And was there a new genre of music that you found or kind of like got into while you were doing the research for this project?
Okay. I think that what really surprised me is that inside this kind of big genres, there's tons of like branch out to really many like subgenres inside. Like some is really like non-mainstream, like chill wave or something in the electronic genres. So I think this is the most surprising part I have found during I'm doing that kind of like data collections or a data group by. Yes.
Loon, thank you so much. And I'm sorry, I know you go by Loon. my mistake.
I think there's a question up here. I know that some of the speakers, thank you for answering them in the chat, but I'd love to hear you answer them to the room as a whole. There's one for Inês. Can you see aliquoty branching out into other maternal technology products, example, post-birth monitoring, or both for mother and child?
Yeah, so for me, I think that's the most danger, and the one that I'm focusing more is in the preterm birth, because I also feel that is the component of the whole pregnancy circuit that it's least explored for now. But I think there's a lot of room to grow. Also in the postpartum, specifically now, with all of the worries related to mental health. When you talk about mothers, there's also a very risk factor of postpartum depression that needs to be seen and not overlooked. And also, I think that when you explore the development of the child until the 5 years old of aging, I think it's very important to understand how that progress is very closely monitored, because that's also a dangerous component that I think that could be explored in the project as well.
That's great. Thank you. Now there's some more questions coming up.
There was a question for Astha that was just asked about if you have a favorite brand, or if it's even appropriate to have a favorite brand. That's an interesting question.
Wow, that's a really great question, because I keep thinking about what my favorite brand is, and it's always changing here and there. But I think for the longest time, it has been Muji. And the very reason it has been is because it started with the concept of that it has to be a faceless brand. They wanted it to be something which is not under the entire aspect of a brand itself. So I find that concept really interesting. However, now we see it as a brand, and you can really tell if a product is from there or not. So I feel it's a tricky question. And also, if we're speaking of a brand which delivers a promise, then yes, Patagonia is something that I really like as well.
Thank you, Astha.
Do the speakers have any questions for your fellow speakers? I'm curious because I see that there's like a lot of wonderful interaction within the chat. I'm curious to also hear how any of these presentations resonated with you, with your other speakers. I think that that's one of the best things about this event is how that actually resonates. So I just want to open it up to the floor. We have about a few more minutes, and then we can close it for the night.
I have a really quick question for Adnan, which is, what's one thing that you wish you could smell? Like, if you could smell one thing, what would it be?
That's a great question. I think it would be like myself. If I am constantly nervous that I smell terrible, like just have the worst BO imaginable, but people are too nice to say anything, they'll just be like, oh, fine, that guy smells over there, but they won't. But because they don't know that I can't smell, they'll never tell me, you know? So if any of you, all 66 of you, if you ever see me out on the street and I smell terrible, please tell me.
Nice, thanks.
What I think is really funny about your answer, just briefly, sorry, is that there is also this idea that I think a lot, you become habituated to your own smell. And so in a way, that's the one thing that maybe we all share, is that we don't smell ourselves. And so, I mean, you really smell yourself if you smell bad, but yeah, like that's maybe the one thing we all share, is that we don't smell ourselves. There's a question for Osama that just came in the chat. Do you see the Vocreate being implemented into other devices outside of the something like the iPad. Feels like it would be an easy thing to kind of create an extension for, other kinds of technology platforms. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Definitely, when I was looking at this, like drawing is one part of it, but you can just take the same. It's basically controlling a cursor, so you can take the same thing and then control, an operating system like that. But when I was working with two artists with spinal cord injuries who weren't able to use their hand, and I was also working with an occupational therapist who also works with people with spinal cord injury. And two of them very interesting ideas which came was, one wanted to drive their car using this. So they wanted to say E to move left and R to move right. So a bit questionable over there. And one also wanted to perform surgery, remote surgery, because it's again like using the cursor. So, I mean, it depends on like how risky the task is or complicated the task is, but definitely like a scalable thing could be made out of this ball joystick.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
We have one more question. This is Stacy from AIGA New York for Genaldri. How was it received when this was launched? But also, like, how do you pick your characters? Like, what was the most challenging part of like having this vast, amazing group of individuals just condensed into something that's a game?
I'll start with the first question. So this was kind of like two connections that people didn't really make a connection to, right? Like a video game and drag queen. So when we made those connections, my program director, like my creative director, was very surprised that like we were able to find these connections. But to answer your question about the characters, so the way that we were envisioning this campaign, so like I mentioned, this game features a prominent and expansive the character customization. So what we originally thinking, like what we envisioned was now the LGBT community, people who are transitioning, they can fully represent themselves in real life and in video game. So that's kind of what we wanted to achieve and accomplish based on this video game or this campaign. Hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, it does. No, thank you for that. That was great. It was such a great visuals. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I really love the sound design of that as well, which I think is something that is often overlooked in these kinds of, coming from this like visual design world. But just specifically and I would be curious to know like your process on that, and if it's, if you have time, but excellent sound design.
Thank you. It was definitely a team effort. As I mentioned, it was a team of 3. We had a copywriter and another art director, so we were all working on it together. But just the creative process, we took inspiration from Game of Thrones, Skyrim, Legendary, Poe. So like we kind of took inspiration from like different medias and different pop culture moments. So we really wanted this game to be relevant in 2023 to the communities that are not usually exposed to video games. So we really wanted to make it wrap it in a nice, pretty bow and send it to the customer.
Really fantastic.
So we have just a couple of more minutes to ask any questions before we say good night. Anybody has any other questions?
There's a question for Ian about book recommendations or design writing recommendations.
Okay, let me see if I can do this. I have all of my books for my thesis right around, so I can spin quickly. Okay, I have way too many book recommendations. So if you can send me your email, I'll send you a long list. But the two that I would really recommend, well, one's a writer. His name is Douglas Holt, and he's written a few books. I'll drop these in the chat. He wrote a book about cultural strategy, and he's written a lot of academic journal essays that were really, really instrumental to me developing my framework for my thesis. And then I really got into the history of consumerism and branding teenagers. And I would say actually two more recommendations. Land of Desire by William Leach is a great turn of the century, you know, from the 19th to the 20th century history of consumerism in America. And then a documentary recommendation, Century of the Self by Adam Curtis. Really fascinating history of marketing and the ad industry, but then superimposed on top of the history of behavioral psychology in the country. So like Freud, Jungian psychology, that kind of stuff. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Ian. One other recommendation in a similar vein is Ruben Pater's Caps Lock book, which has a really great also history of branding in there, and yeah, touches on some similar actually topics that presented themselves actually in a few presentations, and so worth kind of taking a look for folks here. I think we should be wrapping this up, Stacy. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so yeah, thank you to everyone, to all the graduates for presenting. It was fantastic to see your work, and again, a big round of applause to all of you. Again, I wish we could celebrate together in person, but that will have to be saved for another day. I'm so excited to see where you guys all end up in the next month, year, 10 years. I know that you guys are going to be superstars, and yeah, please keep in touch. Yeah, I think we're gonna call it at that. So appreciate everyone logging in.
Thank you
Good to
all.
see you
Have
all.
a very good night.
Have a great night. Awesome.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks again. Bye bye, everyone.
Good night.